Hello and welcome, friends. Uh, Today, we'll be continuing our discussion in rural marketing, and we'll be discussing the rural marketing mix. You would recall that marketing mix consists of product, price, place, and promotion. In today's discussion, we'll be discussing how you modify your marketing mix when you are expanding to the rural markets. So, let us discuss the product first before moving on to price, place, and promotion. So how do you make changes to your product? What all changes do you make to your product? What all modifications do you make to your products? Do you bring about in your products when you are expanding and trying to sell those products in the rural markets? So the first thing that you need to keep in your mind is that your product should be sturdy. It should be strong. It should be able to withstand the tough conditions which generally exist in rural markets. One example can be taken of Mahindra Scorpio, the SUV which was launched by the Mahindra and Mahindra group. Then we have the Rajdoot motorcycles. In fact, when Rajdoot motorcycles were launched in the rural markets, the ad jingle that was used for the promotion of the motorcycles had a line which said, "बड़े पहियों की है बड़ी बात, in रस्तों पे बरसों का साथ." So basically they were trying to tell the customers, prospects, that the Rajdoot motorcycles have bigger wheelbase, and so if you ride a Rajdoot motorcycle you would be easily able to navigate a village road. So you have to make your products very, very sturdy, strong. They should be able to withstand the tough conditions which are prevalent in rural markets. Then you also have to design the product, or you may also modify the design of the product according to customer needs. For example, when LG came up with the Sampoorn TV, first have a look at the brand name, Sampoorn Hindi. It's basically a Hindi word. It's not a word which has been taken from the English vernacular or English language. Again, second thing which they did was they came up with TVs which were resistant to voltage fluctuations, and apart from that the TV had the display in Hindi. So in case you watch your TV, you might have found that the display is generally in English. So for example, if you want to change the brightness would be shown in English. However, when LG came up with Sampoorn TV and tried to sell this particular product in the rural markets, they modified the design of the product and they used Devanagari, which is the script in which Hindi is written. So they used Devanagari script in the displays of the television screens. So instead of brightness probably the TV display was mentioning Prakash. So that was the kind of change that they brought about in their TV. Again, when Volta's refrigerator was launched in the rural markets, they launched these refrigerators with inbuilt stabilizers. I hope you know that earlier stabilizers were used with various electronic equipments because they used to stabilize the incoming voltage. So that is why the name is stabilizers, the machine which stabilizes. So they introduced the inbuilt stabilizers in their refrigerators. Now why did they do that? Because they found out that the rural customers generally tend not to purchase stabilizers. So stabilizers at that point of time used to be a separate piece of equipment which you have to buy with these kind of consumer durable items. So in TV and fridges you had stabilizers. However, stabilizers had to be brought separately, and they found out that the customers either don't buy these stabilizer thinking of it as an unnecessary expenditure, or even if they buy, they don't use it. So they came up with inbuilt stabilizers because they understood that if the customers don't use these stabilizers and something happens to the TV or the refrigerator, the customer is not going to blame himself. The customer is going to blame the company. So they came up with stabilizers which were inbuilt. So they were part of the main television or main refrigerator. Then they also came up with refrigerators which could retain the cold temperature even if there is a power cut for 7-8 hours. Why did they come up with this innovation? Why did they come up with this modification for the rural market? Because in rural markets generally power cuts were very frequent, and the power supply was very, it was not regular as we have power supply in the urban areas. So they came up with a refrigerator which can remain cold, which can retain the cold temperature even if there is a power cut for 7 to 8 hours. So these modifications they brought in their products when they tried to sell their product in the rural markets. Then when you are trying to sell your products in the rural markets, you may also decide to go for smaller lots, because you know that the rural customers can purchase your product but they cannot purchase in large quantities because they don't have that kind of amount available with them in a particular instance. So many companies have started bringing these smaller lots in the market, sachets. Kevin Care is one such company which was among the pioneers. This sachet which has been shown here is the Himani Navratna oil. So they bring up these sachets, they hardly cost around rupees 1 or 2, and it is easier for the rural customer to purchase them rather than purchasing a 300 milliliter bottle which costs around 120-130 rupees or maybe 90-100 rupees. So bringing smaller lots is one modification that you bring to your product. Then whenever you are bringing products for the rural markets, ensure that the designs are not prioritized. The aesthetic design is not prioritized. How beautiful the product is, it's not a big concern for the rural customer. However, the functionality is a bigger concern for him. So he wants the product to perform his function, even if the product doesn't look very attractive, is not available in glossy colors, even then he would be okay with these kind of designs. So you have to ensure that there is more functionality in your product design, which means the product should be able to perform the function for which it is meant, even if it is not very beautiful, not having a great aesthetic design, even then it is perfectly fine. So this happened with Philips free power radio and HMT watches. HMT watches, they used to bring watches which were not very costly, and they used to provide the basic function of keeping the time. So that was the basic function that they used to perform, and there was nothing very attractive about them, but they were still very popular in the rural areas. Apart from that, Philips, what did Philips do? It's a Dutch firm. So they came up with free power radio because they knew that in rural markets generally the power supply is not very reliable. So they came up with a free power radio. What do we mean by free power? They had given a coil along with the radio, and if you just wind the coil for 1 minute, the radio would then get charged and it would work for the next 30 minutes. So every single 1 minute cycle of winding the radio would lead to the radio being operational for the 30 minutes. So you don't need to charge the radio. So that was the functionality they brought in for the radio that they were selling in the rural markets. Basically they modified their product to suit the conditions which exist in the rural markets. So this is what you have to do if you want to be able to successfully negotiate the rural markets. Then as far as the branding is concerned, you should be using easily recognizable names, words, symbols. Many times you use bright colors or very well known symbols. The reason is very simple. The people in the rural markets, they are generally not that literate. The literacy level has started growing, but it is still not comparable to literacy levels in urban markets. Apart from that, even if they're literate, they may not be that much aware. So you need to use a very prominent name as your brand name, or a prominent word as your brand name, or a very prominent symbol, so that they are able to retain that particular word or symbol or that particular color pattern, and they may ask the retailer for that particular product using the word or the symbol or the color pattern that that particular brand depicts. So this is what you should be doing, and there are so many examples. For example, Double Lal Dant Manjan. The color, if you have a look at the color, so rather than asking Double Lal Dant Manjan, many of the rural customers used to ask Lal Wala toothpaste. So just by using bright colors in your packaging, you were able to, as a marketer, to ensure that the rural customers are able to retain your brand name, or at least retain your design, and may ask for that particular design or may ask for that particular color when they go to the retailer. So this is what you do. Again, that is the reason why Asian Paints came up with Gattu when they went for the expansion to rural markets. Now Gattu is a very recognizable figure, so rather than asking for Asian Paints, rural customers would go to the retailer and they would ask कि लड़के वाला paint दे दो. Or similar was the case with Nirma, where they used to ask कि लड़की वाला साबुन दे दीजिए या लड़के वाला डिटर्जेंट दे दो. So the use of these kind of recognizable names and words and symbols ultimately helps the customer to retain the name of the, if he is not able to retain the name of the product, he can at least retain the how it looks and how the packaging looks and who is the, what symbols have been used and what bright colors, what color combinations have been used, and then based on this information he can demand the product from the retailer. So these all modifications you have to bring in your product when you are expanding to the rural markets. Now let us talk about the pricing aspect. How do you modify your pricing? First thing is, basically you have to remove all the frills. You know that people in the village, they are generally not very rich, and naturally to be able to sell to them you should be able to reduce the prices. And how do you do that? Basically you do that by removing the extra features which your product might have. For example, if you talk about Maharaja appliances, they came up with a washing machine which did not have a dryer. So this way they were able to reduce the cost of the washing machine, number one. And secondly, they did not actually compromise on the functionality of the washing machine, because as far as the rural areas are concerned, open area is in abundance, so people can go and dry their clothes in the open areas. So even if there is no dryer, the rural customer is okay with that. So they reduced the extra feature which was there, the dryer in their washing machine, and this way they were able to reduce the cost and they were able to sell to the customers. Likewise, LG TV, it only provided limited number of channels on its display. As far as the other TVs are concerned, which are generally meant for the urban markets, there are maybe 1000 or maybe 900 different channels are possible. You can watch 900 different channels, but they understood in rural areas customers don't watch that much TV. They don't switch channels that often. The reach of the cable TV is much less. So what they did do was they came up with TVs which had only limited number of channels. The option was only for limited number of channels. So this is what they did, and by doing this they were able to reduce their prices. Another thing that the marketers have been doing in the rural markets is they are using refills or reusable packaging. Have a look at this particular reusable packaging. This is the liquid soap which has been packaged in a plastic packet. Now what the customer has to do is, the contents of this particular packet will be emptied into the container which the customer has purchased when he actually purchased the product for the first time. So initially he purchased the container also along with the soap. Now he is only getting the refills, so he can fill up the container using these refills. This way you don't have to provide him the whole container, and naturally your expenditure will be less as a marketer, because you don't have to produce the whole container and then sell it to the customer, but you only have to provide the product in the this kind of a packaging which is shown here. So naturally the prices would be much less, because ultimately you are not producing the container, or you're not selling the container to the customer. You are only selling the content which is there in this particular packaging. So this way you will be able to reduce your prices for the customers. So same thing is done by liquid soaps and brands like Bonvita. Then we have got low cost variants that you can introduce in the rural markets. An example is the Akash tablet, which was at that point of time around 10 to 12 years ago. It cost around $10. That was around rupees 5,000 at that point of time. And now Akash tablet was meant basically for the students in the rural areas, poor sections of the society, poor students in the rural areas. They were to be handed over the Akash tablet. And now please understand that this Akash tablet had limited functionality. It had limited storage space, and though it had Wi-Fi and it could connect to internet through the wireless networks through Wi-Fi, but it did not have any CD-ROM or a CD disk driver, so or a CD reader. Why? Because the reason was very simple. These tablets were meant for the students so that they were basically meant for online studies or maybe tele education, and so connectivity to Wi-Fi was important, but they were not meant to be used for watching movies or playing games. So that was why no CD-ROM was given, no CD reader was given. Again, since they were not expected to store a lot of things, the tablet was to be used just as a communication device so that they can, sitting in the schools in the rural areas, they can have access to lectures online. So naturally there was no storage space also provided. The storage space was also limited, and this way the company was able to reduce this price. That company which was producing this was Datawint from Canada, and it was actually collaborating with the Indian government, so they were able to reduce the prices and sell the products to the customer, or make it easier for the customers in the rural areas to purchase. Again, Tata Samundar salt is an salt which is basically falling in the economic category. Economic category means the Sasta category. So Tatas have basically launched a variant of their already existing well-known salt, which is known as the Tata salt, and this variant is known as Samundar, and this is relatively less expensive because it lacks some of the features which the original Tata salt has. So because of that it lacks features, and because of that it is relatively less costly. Again, Bharat Petroleum, you can have a look at the Indian cylinders which have been shown here. They've come up with 5 kilogram LPG cylinders so that the customers in the rural markets can have access to these kind of cylinders and they can use it, because again the customer may not have the money to purchase the 14 kilogram cylinder, so they launched these 5 kilogram LPG cylinders in the rural markets. Now what basically we are trying to do this to here is using these all three innovative techniques. What we are basically trying to do is we are trying to reduce the prices for our customers, so that they are able to afford our products, and this we have been able to achieve through these three means: by reducing all the extra features, no frills, by using refills or usable packaging, and by introducing low cost variants specifically for the rural markets. Then another thing that you can provide for is you can make credit easily available to the rural customer so that he may buy products that he requires on credit also. And the general rule is, if you are operating in the FMCG sector, then you should provide a credit of 7 to 30 days, and if you are selling agricultural inputs and other such wares, then a credit period of 60 to 90 days, that is almost 3 months, is acceptable. So if you have sold agricultural input, you should ask the farmer to pay, and you should give the time limit for payment should be somewhere around 2 to 3 months. Is this understood? Now when you are coming up with these kind of credit schemes, please understand that people like us, we might require credit only when we are purchasing a phone which costs rupees 20,000, 25,000, rupees 30,000. But as far as the rural customers are concerned, they do not have this much money. So even if they want to purchase an electric iron which maybe costs around 1200 13s, they might require credit because they do not have a lot of money available with them at a particular point in time, so they may require credit. So in that case you will make credit easily available to them. Again, the credit instrument that you are arranging for the rural customer, that should be timed with the cropping cycle, which means the returning the repayment of the credit should be somewhere around the harvest time, because at the time of harvest the farmer is going to get some money by selling his produce in the market, so naturally he is now more capable to repay the loan. Now he has the money to settle his accounts and to pay back the money that he had loaned from a particular bank or a financial institution. So this is how you modify your price when you expand to a rural market. In the next discussion that we'll have, I'll be moving on to the third P and the fourth P, that is place and promotion, and therein we'll be discussing how do we modify these two aspects, the place or the distribution aspect or the promotion aspect, when we are expanding into rural market.